Good evening and welcome to another episode of Mothman Podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Ouija Board and the strange and mysterious history of this board. We're going to look at, is this a tool of the devil, a harmless family game, or a fascinating glimpse into the non-conscious mind or the ghostly realm? So, hi, I'm Daryl.
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Bruce.
And we're going into our podcast. Amanda, you want to take it from the lead?
Yeah, before we get started into the podcast tonight, I just want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, and share. And leave us a comment if you can. And you can always reach us by emailing us at mothmanpodcast@gmail.com. Share with us your paranormal experiences, or you can schedule a time to call into the podcast. Or you can even come into the studio for an interview if you'd like. We'd love to have you.
Or you can request an investigation from yours truly.
That's right. Mm-hmm. We will definitely oblige with the investigations. And you can also ask any questions or suggest a topic for us. So,
and if you do want us to contact you, please answer your phone. We will, or send us an email and give us a time to answer the phone. Apparently there's a lot of prank callers out there, and a lot of you guys don't want to pick up the phone every time if you don't recognize a number. So give us time to call you, and we will call you at that period of time, and you'll know it's from us.
That's right.
And I apologize for what I did with my voice. I don't know what the heck that was. My voice got really low. Like, hey, ladies, you want a personal investigation? You call me. All right. Working on my sexy voice, I guess.
All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Ouija board a little bit. And we're going to start off by talking a little bit about the history. And I think we've all kind of looked into the history of the Ouija and where it came from and that kind of thing. So,
Amanda, I'm going to start off playing this short video, audio clip. And please continue.
I'm sorry. So we're going to talk a little bit about where the Ouija board came from. And we do have a nice little sound clip that gives you a little bit of the history. It goes back a lot further than I realized, all the way back to 1849. So a long freaking time ago. So we're going to hear about that a little bit, and here we go with the sound clip.
Sorry about the technical problems.
In the mid-19th century, fear and a need to know what happens after death create a new movement in America, spiritualism.
Before the American Civil War, spiritualism was really frowned upon. The Civil War came along and society was changing because of death, and for the first time, prominent people were going to these spiritualists to try and contact their dead. It was really ripe territory for something that would turn into quite a phenomenon.
1862, the White House. Mary Todd Lincoln, mother to the nation, is crippled by grief. Her 11-year-old son, William, has died from a fever. The only way to reach him now is through a medium.
Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, was a huge believer in spiritualism and actually conducted seances in the Red Room in the White House.
Merciful spirits, you seek Mary's son, William. Give us a sign.
The medium calls out the letters of the alphabet.
T.
The spirit spells out its message through a series of knocks.
Imagine doing that paragraph after paragraph.
He's here with you.
All of this took a lot of time, and you had to have money to pay these mediums to ask these questions and make contact with the other side.
But their monopoly could soon be over. In the 1880s, a new game grips the country: talking boards. Nobody knows where they come from, but spread by word of mouth and made by hand, They claim to let anyone speak to the dead. No medium, no cost.
It had letters, yes and no. It had good night or goodbye, and it had a movable table that you'd place your fingers on, and it would spell out the letter one by one.
It's this game, played in bars up and down the country, that will change the fortunes of one man. Charles Kennard, a fertilizer salesman from Baltimore.
Kennard was an incredible businessman, always trying to find the next thing that would make money.
And Kennard thinks the talking board could be his next hit. The thrill of speaking to the dead, repackaged as a game.
Charles Kennard believes this is something that could be a bit of a parlor game, something everyone, the whole family, would get involved with.
Kennard knows nothing about the occult, so he joins forces with a local attorney called Elijah Bond and his 28-year-old sister, a medium called Helen Peters.
Helen Peters is a bit of a mystery. For years, I had researched the fathers of the Ouija board, and it turned out it had a mother. We don't know much about, other than she was a strong medium, and she helps name the Ouija board.
Peters' ghostly experiences help transform the handmade talking boards into something they can mass market. And to save money, the first editions are made from recycled wood, taken from coffins.
Oh, that was pretty strong. So
From coffins?
That's right.
that's where they started. Well, if you're going to build something that you want to speak to the dead, where's the best place to go?
That's right. Can you imagine today how much that would be worth to have an original coffin made Ouija board?
That individual who was doing the narrating in this video, he's a collector of the Ouija boards.
Okay.
And he has, they did an interview with him, and CNN did a kind of an interview with him. He didn't want to release where his house is at. He keeps them in his house. And he was talking about, excuse me, they were interviewing his husband, and his husband said that it was a great hobby, but you wouldn't believe the money they have.
Yeah.
He's got something like 250, 300 Ouija boards.
It's more than that. That's how many he had on display.
Okay.
He has.
So you've seen this too.
Yeah, I have. He has something like 20,000, and some of them are original boards. And his husband also said, they said, well, what if he stopped this hobby? He said, we could take a lot of vacations.
That just seems like spiritually irresponsible to have that many in your house.
Well, he's also
he's
the historian
he's a collector.
of Ouija boards, like the historian. So he's not just, he's a collector, yes, and he has literally every kind you can imagine, but he's also the world's only Ouija board historian.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at a person that probably has quite a few figures in his.
Oh, hey. My Marvel collection. We don't get into that, okay? That's worth money too.
I started to say this.
I think my
you can't cut him down for
I say
collecting.
my collectibles. Probably
Do you
worth
own a Ouija board? I'm just curious.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay, I was really curious.
No, and I wouldn't buy one either.
You know, after
I've had bad experiences.
You know,
with them.
I told you I'm the person who kind of disagrees with Ouija boards. Period. But I am considering buying one for the first time ever, if I follow the rules, and I do not intend to ever use it. But you have to keep the planchette separate from the board and thing. I don't know. I'm considering it. My parents would kill me, but
Oh yeah. Well, you know, you start off with some of the history. Go back to the start for the history and kind of give us a brief synopsis of how it came about.
Well, they mentioned this guy. I don't know how you say his name exactly. Kennard or Collard or
Kennard.
Kennard, thank you. I was like, Kennard is the French word for duck. So I don't know. Maybe he's French. No, he was definitely American in the mid 1800s. And the interesting thing is he said, now his sister is the medium who developed the Ouija board. And he is the person who said that the Ouija board told him to build this toy factory. Now, the funny thing about him is how he died. It was a total freak accident. He builds this toy factory, and it was before the factory even opened. And he was, I think it was maybe the second or third floor up at least. And he was trying to fix something with the window. A ladder fell over and pushed him out the window. So he falls to the ground, breaks nearly every bone in his body. They call an ambulance. The ambulance comes to pick him up. I don't know if this was a horse-drawn. I would imagine it was a horse-drawn ambulance. But on the way to the hospital, they hit a large bump. And a rib that was already broken off fell through and pierced his heart. So he died instantly at that point. So that was the day he was supposed to die.
Quote unquote freak accident.
Right.
A spirit through a Ouija board just told you to build a toy factory. And you think
so
that's
it could
be
push you out
accident?
the window.
Yeah, right.
Well, back in the early 1900s, this was, accepted in the churches. It was accepted
Absolutely,
in everyone's home.
Yeah.
And talking about the power of the media,
Mm-hmm.
In 1973, Hollywood started producing movies.
Yeah.
And it all started with a movie called The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And it was a 12-year-old girl who started playing with the board, and by playing with that board, it opened up
It was actually a boy. The real
The
story.
real story, but no, you're
was-
right about the movie.
It was a boy. Yeah.
Reagan. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was a boy. I'm sorry. But he was playing with the board, but anyway, the writers wrote it. And so after that movie came out, Hollywood and everybody started producing
That
these
movie
movies.
scared a lot of people.
Yeah, it was like it took
Linda
over.
Blair is phenomenal. I actually have her autograph.
Are you serious?
She's awesome.
Wow.
But it was almost overnight, the Ouija board became a tool of the devil.
Yeah.
And from that movie, from those writers and the movie makers, everything began popping up of scary movies, usually coming. They was using the board to open the doors to the devil. And so right after that, the Ouija board was denounced by religious groups as Satan's preferred method of communications.
Yeah, it became a satanic tool at that point.
Well,
And,
a lot of people were summoning bad things.
They were.
with their boards and stuff, and the Catholic Church's stance on this is like, obviously if they were a believer, they'd be in heaven. So obviously this is a lost soul or something bad. That's why the church kind of demonized it. I mean, but I mean, look at like shows like Ghost Adventures. Like they went to this dude's house, and the first thing to come through on a Ouija board was the Zozo demon. It's like, I mean, those are the things just waiting to use those tools to have a way to get to you.
Well, if you go to Catholic.com, they call the Ouija board far from harmless. And in 2011, 700 Club host Pat Robertson declared that demons can reach us through the board.
Wow.
So,
well, yeah, because once they announce their presence, that incites fear, and fear is just fuel for anything negative. So,
and can I give you an interesting, because my master's is in history, so I'm always looking at the historic angle here. The time that this happened, that The Exorcist came out and churches started speaking out against pop culture and everything. This was end of the 1960s, beginning of the 1970s. And there was also happening sexual revolution, but you also had Manson. You had people taking drugs for the first time that people hadn't usually done that before. And especially a lot of the adults at the time were like, this is bad. This is not how we grew up in the innocent 1950s.
I mean, they started making a lot of horror movies at that time. That were more risque, like involving nudity, more involving like demons and stuff like that.
And that's when you see the prohibition by evangelical churches, which I grew up in, where they tell you like you're not allowed to go to the movies because all movies are bad.
What you guys are telling me is that if you look for good, you find good. If you look for bad, you find bad. Because what about all these years from the late 1800s to the early 1900s where it was used, even in the churches?
Constantly, even in the churches. And so, that's what I think is very interesting. My great-great-grandmother was a spiritualist, and she held seances in her living room every Thursday night. That was just a thing on Thursday nights. Tuesday nights, they held some other kind of dinner it was called a backwards dinner, and it was in order to conjure the dead. And I think that what you have is just a lot of people wanting to reach out and speak to their loved ones, and I really do believe it was innocent. And then you do, of course, as with every bunch of apples, you've got a bad one. And like my we'll say a friend of mine was telling me how so-and-so played Dungeons and Dragons and then killed their stepfather. I said, yeah, well, there's also plenty of people who have watched VeggieTales and killed their stepfathers. And so it's like you can't say that one thing is the contributing factor.
Well, even after all this, the history on the Parker Brothers later became Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
They still sell thousands and thousands of
they
these
do.
boards every year. But, the Ouija board is, everybody's saying it's more spooky than spiritual.
But have you noticed lately, like a lot of people that are using the Ouija board, especially like the internet videos you see, it's like in a house that they already have like some type of like activity, like almost borderline poltergeist.
Yeah.
And they decide to use a Ouija board in a place that's already that active. Yeah, I mean,
you're just asking for it.
That's a recipe for disaster to begin with.
And there's plenty of videos as well, videos and stories online of, we're talking teenagers and young adults who are trying on purpose to contact demons, and especially this demon Zozo. And that's dangerous. I mean, whether you believe in the spiritual realm or not, playing with the forces of evil and asking evil to come through and be part of your life, that's just a recipe for disaster there.
Well, it is, but it's still Hollywood, and the news media. They start talking about these things, and Hasbro has them to talk about these things because they got them to introduce them on recent TV shows like Breaking Bad. It was used there. Castle, Rossetti, and Isles. The multiple paranormal TV programs, they use these hot topics, and they do that because after every one of these episodes air, sales go up.
That's right.
So
there's the Ouija movie,
right?
And there's part 2.
That movie was terrible. By the way,
yes, it was. I saw it.
It was such garbage.
It was pretty bad.
I didn't sit through the first one, so I definitely wasn't going to sit through the second.
Well, I'm
one.
sure the 13-year-olds loved it and went out and promptly bought a Ouija board at their local Walmart.
Well,
I mean, I really haven't seen a good horror movie in a long time. Although I really did enjoy the Nicolas Cage in that Mandy movie. That movie was trippy. It wasn't really scary, but it was pretty cool.
Okay, we're getting back to, I enjoy horror movies if it's based on truth.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Those are the
Because
best.
that's
Texas
actually
Chainsaw
scary.
Massacre.
Right.
Come on. That's one of the
I
best.
can write a good horror movie. Anybody can write a good horror movie. All you
Yeah.
got to do is put something spooky in there.
I'm actually writing a screenplay for a horror movie right now.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
And I just put my sound effects in and everything. So all you've got to do to make a good horror movie is catch the audience by surprise.
Yeah.
So getting back to the Ouija board, there's a lot of people that really believe in it, and they still believe in it. In 1852, there was a lot of physicians that used it to help communicate with people in the past, to try to learn things, this sort of thing. But, Amanda, for a fact that there's a lot of theory that goes into the scientific belief that when we put our hands on this board, you want to get into that part?
Yeah, there's a scientist named Michael Faraday, and he described during this time period, he was looking at seances that also involved table tipping. And he was kind of asking, like, you know, is there some kind of effect that we're not even conscious of that causes this? And he described it as let me see if I can say this right, the ideomotor effect. And basically that's what he believed that Ouija boards were, that they were just kind of like involuntary movements that were happening through the power of suggestion. So he was kind of looking at like, well, if you suggest to someone, for example, I think I was telling you before about this British show where a guy was trying to see how far he could push the suggestion idea. And he told these people that there were 9 suicides in this hospital, and they were going to try to contact them through the Ouija board. And so they pull out the Ouija board and they look, they start asking questions like, how did you die? Did you die on purpose? And so they got all these answers that were supposedly real. And then to conclude the experiment, he says, guys, I want to explain to you that this is not a true story. There were never 9 people who committed suicide in this hospital. And I just want you to understand that this is through the power of suggestion, this ideomotor effect. So
there's also another good example of that. You know, the whole trick where you hold your hand like this and you try to keep your fingers apart. Right. But, you know, no matter what,
your fingers touch.
Yeah. See, they'll eventually touch. And that's kind of like
it's kind of the same thing. Yep. Yeah. In fact, he used that example. He had one student put their fingers close to each other and like, don't let your fingers touch. But and you can't stop.
Well, and he went on to say that once the idea has been implemented there's almost a readiness to happen. Yeah. So once you
make that suggestion
and feed the basics for this experiment to the persons, they're going to make it happen.
Right.
It's the way it goes. It's just, researchers at the University of British Columbia Visual Department was using the research, and they found out that the boards may be a good way to examine how the mind processes information and on various levels. So they use it in experiments also.
Yeah.
And using the same technology that this doctor from, what'd you say his name was again?
Faraday.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Faraday used, but they used it at the university in giving people hints and then see where they took it.
I'm going to argue against pure ideomotor happenings because I think that there's a spectrum of what happens with a Ouija board. And that's just, like we talked about before, that's just my opinion. And I think that there are a number of them that are just ideomotor events that, especially with younger kids using the board. But I honestly, truly believe that it is not the case in every situation. I think it could be a number of different things. It could be that you're truly contacting the spirit that you intended to contact. For example, if you sit down together and you say, okay, we're going to contact so-and-so's Uncle Joe, and you all say, okay, Uncle Joe, how old were you when you died? And those kind of things, then I think the possibility is there that it could be Uncle Joe. Possibility. But I also think it can be a tool for evil, and I think evil can come through.
Well, that's another couple of podcasts we're going to be doing, white energy and dark energy.
So that'll be a good one.
I will say this, like the 4 times that I've used the Ouija board in my life, and like twice was during investigations, like doing paranormal investigations. Only once was it not terrifying. I just have not had good experiences with them. Everything I've ever like communicated with
a negative.
It's been something malicious. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But was your perception going into the investigation a negative perception, or was it?
Well, one
did
of them,
you really go
one
in
of them I
open-minded?
knew was negative, like off to
Yeah.
begin with. I actually used the Ouija board more as an experiment to see, like, if that would increase the activity and
Right.
Because I wasn't like antagonizing it at all. I was asking like basic run of the mill questions.
Yeah.
Like, and just to get it to communicate, say your name, like how you died or when you were born, stuff, basic
Right.
information, just to kind of figure out what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And it just, like, the messages that came through with me and my buddy Mike, it was like, I'll kill you.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was real.
Really dark.
It actually swore a couple times on the Ouija board, which was interesting. So
Yeah.
you watch your fingers spell out a cuss word instead of an actual answer to what you were asking.
Yeah.
But,
It's funny.
but the negative one, though, I got scratched on
Now I'm
across
starting
my
to say,
shoulders.
I thought I heard you tell the story in the past, but the entity, whatever it was, somehow scratched you. Yeah,
It actually scratched me across my back. Like I had 3 huge claw marks going from my right shoulder all the way across across my spine and to the middle of my back, and they were probably about 8 inches long. I mean, they were good sized scratches, and I was actually bleeding and stuff. Like,
That's crazy.
because I had a white T-shirt on, and like I started bleeding, and Mike was like, "Yo, you like."
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
it was real interesting. And then after we ended the Ouija board session, like there was still like activity going on. You hear banging on the walls, or like a cabinet door opened up in the kitchen. Like it just progressively got worse.
Yeah.
And that was the one that I knew was negative. The other one, though, I didn't know, and I just kind of got caught in the crap storm of what was going on.
Wow.
Well, I just like to see where, like, back in 2011, this 700 host, Pat Robertson, everybody knows who Pat Robertson is, I'm sure. I'd like to see his findings on where he declared that the demons can reach us through the board. If it's such a toy game, and as Hasbro and Parker Brothers had marketed the game, where does this religion belief that the devil can reach through that board and find us? Is it that he's saying that the people that are doing it has dark energy around them, or is it?
That's actually a really good question. The only way to answer that would be to know the research before, like, let's say 1950 all the way back to 1850, to know if there were negative experiences.
Yeah, because everything that we are seeing and hearing prior to 1973, when The Exorcist actually came out and really changed the way that everybody looked at the board, including the religious beliefs. I'd like to know, excuse me, I'd like to know what's out there that showed us positive before that. And I see where the writers wrote the negative part.
Yeah.
But where's the positive come from? Are we just saying it's all negative because of...
Let's see, I think a lot of the positive comes from, back in, it was 1880 when these things were actually first mass produced and being sold. And before that, they were just used by mediums, like, for the whole spiritualism thing. And, not all mediums are legit. So this was also a good way to be a snake oil salesman and con people out of their money. So, who doesn't want to hear what you want them to, what you want to hear? So, they basically tell them, oh, yeah, your loved one's right here.
Yeah.
And they're basically just using mentalism like a magician and kind of guessing. Taking broad general strokes, and people back then weren't as educated, so they were easier, more gullible to dupe.
Well, that's history now. We got all these phone calls being made to our elderly saying we need your Social Security number, and they're giving it out.
For real.
So this is something that's going on through history, and will continue to go on through history as long as there's crooks out there. But what I'm going back to is like Abe Lincoln's wife, who wanted to communicate with her son, and there's knocking on the wall. Now, either that medium was taking her leg across the room and hitting the wall, or there was something actually going on. Mm-hmm. So, here again, we're talking about it could possibly be there, and it possibly not be there.
I hope being the wife of the president that you could actually afford the legit medium.
Decent medium.
Yeah, like I'd hope they'd check her, her references before.
Not one of the Fox sisters.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there were plenty of people who were frauds back then, and this medium could have had, a servant sneak her friend into the house and stand on the other side of the wall and bang on it. I don't know, because there was plenty of that went on back then.
Well, like I said, it's either there or it's not there.
And it could be that she felt pressure. This is the president's wife. I better produce something here.
But see, it's stuff like that that's made it so hard to make paranormal investigations.
Nobody
to be taken serious in the scientific community, because people back then, like I said, they would snake oil salesmen and tell you what you want to hear to make a quick buck.
Right.
And it's like, now that we actually have the equipment to detect these entities, and we actually confirm that there's something there, and it's not all in our heads anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's like, now we have to go back and rethink everything and basically just erase everything we've ever been taught to kind of reboot our perspective on the paranormal.
Well, I hope we're coming to that, because people are kind of accepting, like through things like Ghost Hunter or other shows like that. Or my favorite, Amy Allen, who has actually been tested by the University of Arizona to see how well developed her skills were. I think people are
she's
opening
the chick from
the
Dead
door.
Files, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Oh my God, she's my hero. But she and a lot of others have been vetted at this point by science that at least it says more than 50% probable. With Amy Allen, it's been closer to 85%. So that's pretty good to be asked, contact the dead.
Well, another interesting fact is, you call that the planchette?
Planchette.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the planchette.
Yeah, it's French.
Moving the planchette around the board, they were asked people questions and of objects that they should know something about and they maybe not know anything about.
Uh-huh.
When they'd ask them the questions one-on-one in person, they got a 50% correct answer response.
Uh-huh.
They introduced the board into this scenario, and they got a 65%.
Wow.
So they don't know if it's just the way that we know things we don't know. Mm-hmm. Did that make sense? We know things we don't know.
You mean our subconscious?
Our subconscious,
Yeah.
Going back
I knew what you meant.
Okay. I'm thinking about that. That doesn't sound right. But anyway, showing it, the mentality. Also, another little cute fact was that, you were talking about the 1800s when the boards first come out and everybody's using them. Now you bring the board out and the kids want to know where you put the batteries in.
Right.
So, we're talking about a different mindset.
Well, it was crazy though. For a little while, a lot of toy stores quit selling them. I remember back in the 80s, when I was a kid, I remember not seeing one for almost 10 years because
I never saw one.
Because KB Toys and Toys R Us pulled them from their shelves because
the religious,
because the religious factor, was still going strong. And I
started seeing them in the 90s.
Yeah, and then they started coming back when grunge,
late 90s.
Well,
you can think my generation.
And that goes back to my conversation we had earlier where I said they started introducing them into TV programs.
Yeah.
And people started seeing them again.
Making it acceptable.
And making it, they didn't really bring out the devil part of it. They brought out the good part of it because they were trying to solve crimes and these boards helped them solve crimes. Mm-hmm. Then, wow, they came back on the market again. So they're back out on the market right now.
And the price is also up.
I'm sure.
They used to be $40 or something like that.
Oh, really? Well, okay, then it's down to 20.
I remember there for a little while because they didn't, even though they had brought them back, they still didn't really want. It felt like they didn't want people to buy them.
Yeah.
So they were selling them for
for way too much.
Yeah, for $40 a piece, and it's that for a fold out piece of cardboard and a plastic thing with a a little magnifying lens. In it. I was like,
Now, see, Amy Allen says she would never use a Ouija board, but she owns some, which makes me interested. But she collects them. She's got a lot more money than me.
But see, I always get scared because stuff.
I know, and that's the thing is I don't want to be afraid.
Latch on to items. I mean,
yes,
you got stuff like Robert the haunted doll that inspired Annabelle.
Yeah,
like, it would be way too easy for a spirit to latch onto a Ouija board, especially one made out of the wood from a coffin. Yeah,
I don't believe you can buy one for $20 made from a coffin.
Made from a coffin.
Yeah. No, that would be
unless you procure your own coffin.
Hey, we don't want to put the word out there for some people to go out there and start digging up coffins.
So what you need to do is you need to put it on the lid of your coffin, and that way when they want to ask you, hey, was it you that hit the dog before you died? And then you can finally answer the question.
Yeah, one of those like gimmicky coffin kind of things.
Well, guys, Amanda, you want to summarize what you think the board is all about and what you think it...
I think it's real. I think it's dangerous. I think after the research that I've done, I think that used by a medium who is contacting one person, because that's what mediums do. We don't just put the word out like, hey, any spirit coming by, please come and, channel through me. We don't do that. In fact, one of the things I always say when I'm contacting a spirit is, I only want to see this person, blah, blah, blah. I do not want to see any other person but blah, blah, blah. And if anything else comes near me, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So I do protection. I use sage, and I'm very careful. And mediums are trained to contact the dead. There are rules that we have to follow, and if they're not following them, they're not a good medium, and they're a danger to society anyway. But if a medium is to use it properly, I think I'm okay with it. I personally still would not touch one, would not use it. I still am interested in possibly buying one in the future, but I'm not ready to do that right now.
Well,
Bruce, do you want to give us your...
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just make a round table vote of the deal.
Yeah.
I know it's real, but, and a lot of the people that had negative experiences, I think, like I said, spiritually irresponsible when I was talking about storing them. But, you got to close the session. You can't leave it open.
Right.
I mean, there are people who freak out, they throw the planchette in the middle of it, and you
that's
got
the worst thing you can do.
And you've got an open channel to an angry spirit.
Yep.
It's like,
well, that's the reason they put the bye on it, right? Goodbye.
Yeah, you have to say goodbye.
But but there are some people who will fake it, or I don't know if they do it to mess with their friends or what, but they'll kind of guide it. I think, like I said, some people it might just be their subconscious, especially the ones that aren't getting real answers.
Yeah.
But if you know what you're doing and you're I think if you're focusing on a certain thing, you could definitely get results.
Yeah.
But I will never own one. I will never use one again. Well, if Daryl ever wants to run that experiment, I will film it.
But
I will not touch that board.
Well, Daryl's on his own on that one.
we'll have Daryl and some random volunteers.
Maybe we'll get Bob the cat,
and I will just sit back and.
I'm looking for volunteers out there to be.
Yeah, because I
just saw Bob the cat raise his paw.
I was going to say, because when I had that bad experience, that thing attached itself to me, and I had nightmares for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
like after that investigation, and that's why I really just don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
Well, the old saying is, you've heard my wife say, "Don't bring anything home."
Don't bring anything home. But that's why I sage now.
I believe everything we look at is attached to something. But if you start opening doors and bringing stuff in that's not attached to something, you got a whole new ball game to play there.
Right.
Excuse me again, Amanda. Would you give us the 21 rules on how to use the Ouija board before we close this podcast?
Right. So the caveat is you shouldn't use the board. But if you're going to insist on doing it, there are some serious rules, and you can find these online. Anybody online that has any common sense will post the Ouija board rules for you. So first of all, they're not a joke. So children should not be playing with them, period. Even though they're sold in the toy section, it's not a toy. So you need to make sure you understand that. The most important rule is to never taunt or try to annoy a spirit. If you think a spirit is coming through, especially, that can really cause some bad things to happen. You never ask when you're going to die, period. Don't ever do it. You don't want the answer, and who knows if the spirit's going to be honest or lie, or that suggestion causes you to die on that day.
Or the planchette goes 3, 2,
yes.
1. Worst scenario.
Even worse. Let's see. Spirits who talk through the Ouija board can tell you anything you want, but you have to understand, just because you hear it on the Ouija board doesn't mean it's true. It's kind of like the internet. You don't listen to everything it says. So it could be something that's true, or it could be not true, and you just don't really know. You're never going to use a Ouija board alone. That's a bad thing. Don't use one in your home, and you don't use them in cemeteries. So where should you use it? A park is okay. Outdoors somewhere is probably the best place, but you don't want to put that in your home. Let's see. One person in the group should be the leader, and they should be the person who is asking questions for the group. Then if you're not the leader, you need to be quiet. So you're not going to be talking or cutting up or laughing, because that's not the spirit that should be that you should be in when you're using the Ouija board. The next thing is that you shouldn't be asking joke questions. So you don't want to be like, "Hey, Grandma, what's your favorite bra?" I don't know. Couldn't think of another one.
I wouldn't want the answer to that
Daryl's
question.
laughing.
Grandma, why do you have Victoria's Secret?
So you don't want joke questions. You want to keep it serious. One person should be writing down the answers. So you should have an observer, basically. And hey, like Bruce said, if you want to film it, that's an even better idea. But definitely write down the words that are being spelled out. You never leave the planchette on the board. When you're done, you always take it off of the board and you store it away from the board. You do not want to store the board and the planchette together. If you take a break, or if you're like, somebody's freaking out, one person at least has to keep their hands on the planchette, and you always end your session with a goodbye. You want to use some candles. You do it in the dark usually. That's not necessary, but it'll add a little bit to the freak factor if you're into that. If a spirit's communicating with you and the counting starts going backwards, or it goes through the alphabet backwards, you need to immediately say goodbye and take the board apart and store it.
That is that Diablo speak in reverse.
Yes, exactly.
Like the Chicago record.
If a spirit starts to communicate with the figure 8, that's another reason to say goodbye and stop with the board. If you begin to suspect that you're in contact with a bad spirit, again, say goodbye and leave the board. If you talk to a spirit who says that they are Zozo, we'll have to get into the whole Zozo thing on another podcast because it's a long story.
I'll give you guys a history lesson on Zozo at another time.
But it's a bad thing. So if it spells out Z-O-Z-O, say goodbye. You don't use a Ouija board in a cemetery, like I said. And if you're sick or depressed or not in the right sorts, you do not want to use a Ouija board. And you never, ever burn a Ouija board. If you have to get rid of it, you're going to break it up into 7 pieces and throw those away. And you're going to throw the planchette away separately.
I heard it's also good to bury it in rock salt.
Oh, that's definitely a cleanser. So that's not a bad idea at all. But you don't want to burn it, because if you do that, you're unleashing it.
Yeah, you're releasing the spiritual energy.
Yeah.
Wow, guys, I think I've learned a lot. I think our audience has learned a lot. So
yeah.
Thank y'all for tonight's podcast.
I learned a lot from researching all this stuff.
Right. And again, if you like our podcast, make sure that you go and like us on Facebook and like us on YouTube. And contact us through Mothman Podcast at gmail.com. We're starting to get quite a few emails in now, and we'll get back to them just as quickly as possible. But if you want to go do a Ouija board, contact us, and I'll meet you out in Tanglewood.
But like you said, like us. Like me. Like me.
Like, subscribe, and comment.
There you go. So until our next podcast, thank you for listening. And we will talk to you next time.
I feel like I should drop a freestyle flow right here at the end. My mixtape.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, guys.